What happens when a former president walks onto a morning show set, and everything that could go wrong does go wrong? When two strong personalities collide in front of millions of viewers and neither one is willing to back down? That's exactly what happened when Donald Trump and Michael Strahan faced off on Good Morning America, an interview that quickly turned explosive. The morning had started with tension simmering beneath the surface. In the green room, Donald Trump sat in a leather chair surrounded by his team, who formed a tight circle around him like a protective barrier. Across the room, producers were running through last-minute checks, clipboards in hand, headsets buzzing with instructions from the control room. Trump's PR director leaned in, whispering that he should keep things light, stay on message, and focus on promoting his new book. Trump waved her off impatiently, clearly uninterested in being told how to handle an interview. Meanwhile, Michael Strahan was in his corner of the studio, reviewing his notes with quiet focus. He had interviewed hundreds of guests over the years, actors, athletes, politicians, but this one felt different. There was an edge to it, a charge in the air he couldn't quite shake. His producer, Sandra, appeared at his side, concern written across her face. She warned him that Trump's team was already pushing back against certain questions, anything related to the legal cases, the election, or topics that might seem confrontational. Strahan nodded slowly, then said firmly that he wasn't changing a single question. Sandra gave a resigned nod. She'd expected that answer. By the time the studio audience filed in, the energy was electric. People snapped photos, whispered to one another, and waited eagerly to see how the interview would unfold. The lights dimmed, the cameras moved into position, and the floor director began his countdown. Strahan walked out with his usual charismatic smile, greeted by applause. After a brief introduction, he welcomed his guest. Donald Trump emerged to a mixed reaction, some claps, some murmurs, a few uneasy silences. He shook Strahan's hand with his trademark firmness and took his seat. At first, things went smoothly. Strahan congratulated Trump on his new book and asked about his writing process. Trump relaxed into his rhythm, gesturing animatedly as he spoke about his vision for the country, telling grand stories and sprinkling in familiar boasts. The audience chuckled and clapped at all the right moments. For a brief stretch, it seemed like any other high-profile interview. Then Strahan shifted slightly, glancing down at his notes, and everything changed. He brought up the ongoing legal challenges, the indictments, and the accusations of election interference. He asked Trump directly how he responded to critics who said he was undermining democratic institutions. The former president's expression hardened instantly. Leaning forward, he jabbed a finger toward Strahan and called it a nasty question, accusing him of pushing the same fake news narrative that had targeted him for years. He said he expected better from Strahan and thought this was going to be a real conversation, not, as he put it, a hit job disguised as an interview. Strahan didn't back down. Calmly, he said these were questions millions of Americans wanted answers to. He wasn't trying to ambush anyone. He was trying to have a substantive discussion. Trump interrupted sharply, insisting Strahan was reading from a script. Questions handed to him by the same people who had been trying to bring him down since day one. The studio fell silent. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of tension between them. Strahan, composed but firm, replied that no one put words in his mouth. These were legitimate questions, he said, based on real events reported by every major outlet in the country. Trump gave a dry laugh, shaking his head. He asked Strahan if he actually believed what he read in the papers. The media, he said, had been wrong about him from the beginning, predicting he'd never win, pushing conspiracies, twisting the truth, and now they were doing it again. Turning toward the audience, Trump raised his voice and asked them directly if they believed fake news or their own eyes. Strahan cut in, his tone steady but firmer now. This isn't about belief, he said. It's about facts. There are court cases, indictments from grand juries, and documented attempts to overturn election results. The audience held its breath, sensing that they were witnessing something rare on live television, a clash between two men who refused to yield, each determined to control the narrative. Strahan's tone sharpened as he reminded Trump that these weren't media inventions. They were legal realities. Court filings, indictments, and sworn testimonies existed. He asked again how Trump justified his actions to the American people watching right now. Trump's face reddened. He accused Strahan of being disrespectful, claiming he'd come on the show in good faith but was being treated like a criminal. He called it a disgrace and said, "Good Morning America should be ashamed of how they treated their guests." Strahan fired back without hesitation. The show, he said, treated guests with respect, but respect didn't mean avoiding real questions. That was journalism, and that was what the audience deserved. Trump leaned forward in his chair, his posture turning combative. He snapped that he didn't need a lecture on journalism from a guy who used to play football. The audience gasped softly. Strahan's expression hardened as he shot back that it was a cheap shot, and Trump knew it. He said he had earned his place behind that desk through years of hard work and integrity, and he wasn't going to apologize for asking tough questions. That was his job. The tension in the studio became suffocating. In the control room, producers whispered frantically about whether to cut to commercial, but the ratings were spiking. Millions were watching, riveted. The decision was made. Let it play out. Trump leaned back, crossing his arms, his jaw locked tight. Strahan shuffled his notes, trying to regain composure, and suggested they move on. He wanted to give Trump a fair chance to address specific allegations, namely the classified documents case. He asked why those sensitive materials had been found at Trump's residence and why his team had resisted returning them. Trump's composure snapped. He exploded, declaring those were his documents and that he had every right to them. He invoked the Presidential Records Act, claiming it gave him authority over the materials, and said the Justice Department was twisting the law to target him. Strahan calmly cited legal experts who said that interpretation was false. Trump cut him off mid-sentence, shouting that those experts were biased, probably paid by his opponents. For the first time, Strahan raised his voice. He said Trump couldn't just dismiss everyone who disagreed with him as biased. At some point, he said firmly, you have to take responsibility. Trump shot back instantly. And what do you know about responsibility, Michael? Have you ever had the entire weight of the country on your shoulders? Every decision twisted by people who hate you? Strahan leaned forward. This isn't about me, he said evenly. It's about you and the choices you made. Trump gave a bitter laugh. Exactly, he said. Everything's always about me. Strahan countered that the real issue was accountability, whether someone in power believed they were above the law. The two men locked eyes, unblinking, their stare-off lasting several charged seconds. The audience sat frozen, torn between fascination and discomfort. This wasn't polished morning television anymore. It was raw, unfiltered confrontation. Strahan finally leaned back, trying to steer things toward civility. But Trump wasn't done. Pointing directly at the camera, he spoke to the viewers at home. The American people are smart, he said. They can see what's happening here. A biased host trying to make me look bad, because that's what the establishment wants. Strahan's patience thinned. His tone sharpened as he told Trump to stop playing the victim. He said Trump had been given a national platform, a chance to clear the air. But instead of addressing valid concerns, he was deflecting and attacking. Trump's eyes narrowed. Have you ever been investigated for something you didn't do? He asked coldly. Ever had your life torn apart by people determined to destroy you? Strahan shook his head. No, he admitted. But that doesn't make your investigations invalid. It means you made choices that led to them. Trump let out a bitter chuckle, saying Strahan would never understand. He'd never had enemies that powerful, never seen the justice system weaponized against him. Strahan's voice rose again, frustration seeping through. The justice system isn't being weaponized, he said. It's doing its job. When someone breaks the law, there are consequences, no matter who they are. That's the foundation of American democracy. Trump leaned forward, sarcasm dripping from his words. That's a nice speech, he said. Very inspirational. But it ignores reality. I've been right about everything. The media, the deep state, the people trying to destroy me. I've been proven right again and again, and you people still refuse to admit it because you need me to be the villain. Strahan didn't back down. Right about what exactly? He pressed. Trump spread his hands as if the answer were obvious. Right about the fake news. Right about the corruption. Right about the system that's terrified of me because I tell the truth. Strahan leaned in, his voice firm but composed. Then give specifics, he said. Show your evidence. Don't just throw out accusations. Trump's frustration was visible now. his jaw tight, his hands gripping the armrests. "I've given specifics 1,000 times," he said angrily. "But people like you don't want facts. You want headlines. You want controversy." Strahan's tone softened slightly, almost imploring. "That's not true. I actually want to understand your perspective. But you can't just attack everyone who questions you." Trump suddenly pushed himself halfway out of his chair, not quite leaving but clearly signaling he was done. "This interview is exactly what I expected," he said bitterly. "Exactly what my team warned me about. I should have listened." Strahan stayed seated, his voice calm but firm. "You're free to leave if you want to," he said. "But walking away from tough questions doesn't make them disappear. It just makes it look like you can't answer them." Trump hesitated, then sat back down, his body stiff with anger. "I'm not running from anything," he said. "I've faced tougher interviews from tougher people than you." Strahan raised an eyebrow. "If that's true," he said evenly, "then answering mine should be easy." Trump glared at him. "The questions aren't hard," he said. "They're dishonest, framed to assume guilt, stripped of context, designed to make me look bad no matter what I say." Strahan shuffled through his notes slowly, letting the silence hang in the studio before finally looking up and asking about January 6th. The question landed like a thunderclap. Trump's entire demeanor shifted. His face reddened, his hands gripped the armrests of his chair, and he muttered that he knew this question was coming. "It was always the same attack," he said. "The one his opponents used whenever they wanted to shut down any discussion of his accomplishments." Strahan calmly replied that it wasn't an attack, it was history. The Capitol had been breached, lives were lost, and there were serious questions about Trump's role in those events. Trump interrupted sharply, insisting he had told people to be peaceful, to protest peacefully and patriotically. Anyone who said otherwise was lying or hadn't watched his full speech. Strahan countered that the speech was only part of the story. What about the hours that followed when violence erupted and Trump didn't step in to stop it? What about the pressure on the vice president and the attempts to overturn election results in multiple states? Trump's response was immediate and defiant. He declared the election stolen, saying there was overwhelming evidence of fraud and that millions of Americans knew the truth, even if the media refused to report it. Strahan's tone hardened. He pointed out that those claims had been investigated, litigated, and dismissed by courts nationwide, including by judges Trump himself had appointed. When would he accept that he had lost? Trump replied that he would never accept a fraudulent result. Doing so, he said, would betray everyone who voted for him. The back and forth intensified, neither man giving ground. Strahan cited specific court cases, recounts, and audits that confirmed the election's legitimacy, while Trump brushed them all aside, claiming the system was rigged, the evidence ignored, and the process compromised. Strahan asked if Trump realized how dangerous his rhetoric was, how it eroded public faith in democracy itself. Trump shot back that what truly undermined democracy was allowing fraudulent elections to go unchallenged. Strahan exhaled slowly, trying to keep composure. He said they were going in circles, that Trump refused to accept anything that contradicted his narrative. Trump retorted that Strahan's network had pushed the Russia hoax for years. Strahan replied that the investigation had led to multiple convictions. It wasn't a hoax. Trump waved dismissively, calling it a witch hunt from start to finish. By now, the interview had devolved into a verbal brawl, two men locked in opposing realities, neither willing to yield. The studio was silent except for their voices, cameras capturing every tense second. Strahan glanced toward his producer, who signaled to wrap it up, but there was no graceful exit. He said he had one last question. Would Trump run again, and did he believe he could unite a deeply divided country? Trump smirked, saying the country was divided because of people like Strahan, because of lying media and corrupt politicians who cared more about power than the people. Strahan said that wasn't an answer. Trump replied, "It's the only one that matters." When pressed again for a direct answer, Trump smiled thinly and said he'd announce his plans when he was ready, and that the American people, not a morning show host who spent 20 minutes attacking him, would hear it first. Strahan insisted he wasn't attacking anyone, just asking questions. Trump scoffed that in today's world, questions were attacks when designed to make him look guilty. The tension was suffocating. Strahan looked straight into the camera, then back at Trump, saying America deserved a leader who could answer tough questions without crying persecution, someone who took responsibility instead of blaming others. Trump shot back that America deserved a leader who fought for them, who wouldn't bow to elites or media spin, and who dared to speak unpopular truths. Strahan's jaw tightened. He said truth must be based on facts, not feelings or political convenience. Trump leaned back, arms crossed, and said facts were whatever the media decided they were. And right now, they had decided he was guilty of everything imaginable. Strahan countered that facts existed independently of opinion, but Trump laughed bitterly, calling that naive. Facts, he said, were always twisted by interpretation. Leaning forward, Strahan asked one final time if Trump had ever considered that some of the criticism against him might be legitimate, that maybe some of his legal troubles stemmed from his own actions rather than a vast conspiracy. Trump's expression turned to stone. That, he said, was exactly what was wrong with interviews like this. The assumption of guilt baked into every question. Strahan disagreed, saying he was only asking Trump to consider other perspectives. Trump said he had and rejected them because they were wrong. How can you be so sure? Strahan asked quietly. Trump met his gaze and said, because I lived it. I was there. I know what happened, not what the media says happened. The air in the studio was thick with tension as Strahan sat back, realizing there would be no breakthrough. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a collision of worlds, and neither man was ever going to cross to the other side. The audience sat in complete silence, watching the clash unfold like a live collision of two worlds. Some viewers had their phones out, recording every second, aware that what they were witnessing would be replayed and debated long after the cameras stopped rolling. Strahan looked drained, the strain of trying to hold a rational conversation with someone who seemed to reject the very premise of shared reality visibly wearing him down. He thanked Trump for coming on, even if the exchange had been contentious. Trump smirked, saying contentious was an understatement. This was one of the most biased interviews he'd ever experienced. Strahan's calm demeanor faltered. He said Trump had been given every opportunity to explain his positions and address the questions millions of Americans wanted answered, but instead had spent the entire interview attacking, deflecting, and casting himself as a victim. Trump rose from his seat abruptly, declaring he was done. This was a waste of time. He accused Strahan of being more interested in scoring points than actually listening. Strahan stood as well, meeting him eye to eye, his athletic frame steady and commanding. He told Trump that he was the one who hadn't listened, that he'd come in expecting to be treated unfairly and had made sure to prove himself right by being combative from the very beginning. Trump shot back that he had to be combative, because showing any weakness meant people like Strahan would exploit it. That's the game, he said, and I've learned how to play it better than anyone. The two men stood facing each other, the air between them thick with tension. Strahan told him he could leave whenever he wanted. No one was forcing him to stay. Trump said he'd been ready to leave for 10 minutes, staying only out of respect for the audience. Strahan countered that if he truly respected the audience, he'd give them honest answers instead of conspiracy theories. Trump retorted that the audience didn't need Strahan to interpret reality for them. They could see for themselves what was happening. A producer nervously stepped onto the set, suggesting a break to defuse the situation. Trump brushed her off and turned back to Strahan. I expected better from you, he said coldly. I thought maybe you'd be different from the rest of the media hacks. Strahan replied evenly. And I expected you to act like a statesman instead of a bully. I guess we were both disappointed. Trump's eyes blazed. He said calling him a bully was just another cheap trick, something people did when they couldn't win an argument on the facts. Strahan said there was no argument to win, just facts Trump refused to accept. Trump insisted those weren't facts, just narratives pushed by people who wanted to see him destroyed. Strahan replied that not everything was about Trump, that the world didn't revolve around his persecution complex. Trump snapped that his persecution wasn't a complex at all. It was real, and anyone paying attention could see it. Strahan took a step closer, saying what people could see was a former president unable to accept that his time had ended, unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. Trump jabbed a finger toward him, his voice rising, accusing Strahan of ignorance, of having no idea what true accomplishment looked like, of daring to lecture him on responsibility when he'd achieved more than Strahan ever could. Strahan fired back that accomplishment didn't excuse accountability, that success didn't put anyone above the law. Trump growled that he'd never claimed to be above the law but refused to be persecuted by what he called a weaponized justice system targeting political enemies. Strahan stepped back, creating a bit of distance. He told Trump that if he truly believed the justice system was unfair, he had the right to defend himself in court, to present evidence, to make his case. But turning every interview into a war wasn't defense, it was distraction. Trump scoffed that Strahan didn't understand strategy, that he had to fight back in the court of public opinion because, as he put it, the real courts are compromised. When Strahan asked how, Trump claimed they were filled with politically motivated judges and prosecutors who'd never dare treat anyone else the way they treated him. Strahan shook his head, calling it another conspiracy theory, another excuse to dodge accountability. Trump barked that justice wasn't supposed to mean persecution, and what was happening to him was anything but justice. The producer stepped in again, more firmly this time, saying they were out of time. Trump ignored her, glaring at Strahan. "This interview," he said, "is proof of everything I've been saying. Proof that the media is biased. Proof that they're all out to get me." Strahan replied calmly that the only thing this interview proved was that Trump couldn't handle being challenged, that he crumbled the moment anyone pushed back. Trump's face flushed deep red, his control gone. "I don't crumble," he shouted. "I fight back. That's what winners do." Strahan said that real winners also knew when to admit they were wrong, when to take responsibility, when to put their country before their ego. Trump said it wasn't about ego. It was about truth, about standing up for what was right even when the world was against you. Strahan said standing up for what was right meant accepting reality, even when it was uncomfortable. Trump finally turned away from him, addressing the audience directly. "You all saw it," he said. "You saw how the media twists everything, how they attack anyone who won't play along. But I thank the people who still believe in me, the ones who see through this." With that, he tore off his microphone, handed it to a startled audio technician, and stormed off the set without another word. Strahan stood silently for a few moments, watching Trump disappear behind the curtains, his face unreadable. Then he turned back to the camera, took a steadying breath, and addressed the viewers. He admitted the exchange had been intense and far from what anyone had expected, but said conversations like this mattered, that asking hard questions was part of his duty, and he wouldn't apologize for it. The screen faded to commercial, leaving millions of viewers stunned, debating what they'd just witnessed. As the broadcast cut out, the voiceover urged viewers to stay tuned, to like, subscribe, and share their thoughts. Did Michael Strahan cross the line, it asked, or was he just doing his job as a journalist?